Baal, the false god, and the religious conflict in ancient Israel. Baal, regarded as a false god by the ancient Hebrews and other monotheistic faiths, was a prominent deity in the ancient Near East, particularly within Canaanite and Phoenician cultures. His worship presented a major religious challenge to the monotheistic beliefs of the Israelites, as well as a deep theological conflict regarding the exclusivity of Yahweh worship. This narrative is sponsored by Polly Speaks For You. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been passionate about empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You isn't just a tool. It's a bridge for people to communicate and interact with the world in a meaningful way. By blending historical storytelling with cutting-edge tech, the creator showcases how powerful a voice can be, whether telling your own story or preserving history. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button and help this channel grow. Now back to the story. 1. Who was Baal? Baal, meaning Lord or Master, was not a single god but rather a title used for various deities in the ancient world. The most notable Baal was the Canaanite god of storms, fertility, and agriculture, also referred to as Hadad or Baal-Hadad. As a weather god, Baal was believed to control rain, thunder, and the fertility of crops, making him essential to agrarian societies. Baal was depicted as a warrior god who triumphed over enemies like the sea god Yam and the god of death Mot. 2. Worship of Baal. Canaanite religion. Baal was a central figure in the Canaanite religion, which spanned modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Syria. Cities like Ugarit and Tyre were especially devoted to Baal. Baal's temples and priests. Temples to Baal were significant religious centers, often led by priests and priestesses who performed rituals to secure fertility and successful harvests. The worship practices involved sacrifices and elaborate ceremonies. Fertility cults. Baal's connection to fertility extended beyond crops to livestock and human life. Fertility rites, including sacred prostitution, were practiced in some areas as a means to ensure prosperity. 3. Baal in conflict with Yahweh. Biblical accounts. In the Bible, Baal is condemned as a false god, leading the Israelites astray from their covenant with Yahweh. Worship of Baal is seen as apostasy and a direct violation of the monotheistic beliefs held by the Israelites. Elijah and the prophets of Baal. One of the most well-known stories surrounding Baal worship is the confrontation between the prophet Elijah and the priests of Baal on Mount Carmel, 1 Kings 18. In this dramatic contest, the priests of Baal failed to summon fire from their god, while Elijah successfully called upon Yahweh, leading to a public rejection of Baal worship. King Ahab and Jezebel. Under King Ahab, particularly influenced by his Phoenician wife Jezebel, Baal worship was promoted in Israel. Jezebel's efforts to convert the Israelites to her native gods, including Baal, led to intense opposition from prophets like Elijah. 4. Baal worship practices. Sacrifices. Baal worship often involved the sacrifice of animals, such as bulls or sheep, in hopes of securing rain and agricultural fertility. There are also historical references to child sacrifice, particularly in Phoenician colonies like Carthage. Idolatry. Baal was worshipped through idols, typically statues placed in high places or sacred groves. The Bible frequently condemns the practice of erecting altars and idols to Baal, viewing it as a betrayal of the Israelites' exclusive covenant with Yahweh. Religious festivals. Baal's worship involved seasonal festivals celebrating his control over storms and rainfall, marking key agricultural periods like planting and harvest. These festivals symbolized Baal's triumph over chaos and death, bringing order and abundance to the world. 5. Theological conflict with monotheism. Israel's struggle with idolatry. The worship of Baal was a recurring issue throughout Israel's history, particularly during the period of the Judges and the divided monarchy. The Israelites, influenced by surrounding Canaanite practices, occasionally turned to Baal worship, prompting calls for repentance from the prophets. The sin of syncretism. One of the key theological issues was the blending of Yahweh worship with Baal worship, a practice known as syncretism. The prophets decried this mixing, emphasizing that Yahweh demanded exclusive loyalty from his people. Cultural and political influence. Baal worship was not just a religious issue. It was also politically motivated. Canaanite city-states and Phoenician colonies like Tyre and Sidon were powerful, and their rulers promoted Baal worship to strengthen political and economic ties. 6. The decline of Baal worship. Over time, particularly after the fall of Israel to the Assyrians and Judah to the Babylonians, Baal worship began to fade. The Babylonian exile and subsequent return to Jerusalem marked a period of religious reform, during which the Israelites fully embraced monotheism and rejected polytheistic practices, including the worship of Baal. Baal as a symbol of apostasy. In both the Hebrew Bible and later Christian and Jewish theology, Baal became synonymous with apostasy, the abandonment of true faith. Baal worship was seen as the epitome of turning away from the ethical monotheism of Yahweh and embracing false gods driven by materialism, power, and fertility. The prophets of Yahweh, like Elijah, represented the struggle for faithfulness and the rejection of idolatry in favor of true worship of Yahweh. Certainly, here's an extended exploration of the subject. 7. Baal and other cultures. Baal was not unique to the Canaanites. The name Baal, meaning Lord, was used for a variety of deities across the ancient Near East, though it was often associated with the god of storms and fertility. The figure of Baal was adopted and adapted by many cultures surrounding ancient Israel, including the Phoenicians, Ugaritians, and other Semitic peoples. In Phoenician culture, Baal was a prominent figure, and his worship was particularly strong in the cities of Tyre and Sidon. He was closely associated with the fertility of the land, the harvest, and the prosperity of the city. The Phoenicians, known for their seafaring and trading, incorporated Baal worship into their political and cultural life, establishing strong ties with their neighbors through religious practices. Baal's role as a god of the harvest meant that he was central to the agricultural societies that relied on the god's favor for good rainfall and bountiful crops. In Ugaritic texts, Ugarit, an ancient city-state in what is now Syria, provides a wealth of information about the worship of Baal. The Ugaritic texts, discovered in the 1920s, contain elaborate myths and rituals concerning Baal. These texts describe Baal's battle with the sea god Yam and the death god Mot, reflecting Baal's role as a god of order who brings fertility and prosperity by defeating chaos. These stories played an important role in maintaining Baal's status as a central deity within the Canaanite pantheon. 8. Baal's influence on other gods. In ancient polytheistic belief systems, gods were often seen as interconnected, and their roles could overlap or influence one another. This was particularly true for Baal, whose worship influenced and was influenced by other deities. The relationship between Baal and Asherah. Baal was often paired with the goddess Asherah, who was considered a mother goddess of fertility, love, and the sea. In many Canaanite rituals, Baal and Asherah were worshipped together, representing a divine pair that maintained the balance of nature and human life. Asherah was frequently associated with sacred groves, and altars to her were often found alongside those of Baal. The Bible mentions the worship of Asherah alongside Baal as a significant part of the religious conflict between Israelite monotheism and Canaanite polytheism. Baal and the Roman deities. The influence of Baal worship can even be traced in later Roman religion. Baal's association with fertility and agricultural prosperity resonates with Roman gods like Jupiter and Saturn, who were responsible for controlling the weather and agricultural cycles. In the same vein, Baal's representation as a warrior god and his victory over chaos bears some resemblance to the roles played by gods like Mars in Roman mythology. 9. Baal and syncretism in Israel. Syncretism, the blending of different religious beliefs and practices, was a key issue for the Israelites when it came to Baal worship. While many of the Israelites were steadfast in their devotion to Yahweh, they were often tempted by the surrounding cultures and the lure of fertility, prosperity, and political power represented by Baal. Baal worship in the period of the Judges. The book of Judges details how, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites fell into cycles of apostasy and idolatry. In these periods, the Israelites turned to the gods of their Canaanite neighbors, including Baal, when they faced challenges like military defeat or crop failure. The prophets repeatedly warned the people to return to Yahweh, denouncing the worship of Baal and other foreign gods. Baal worship in the divided kingdom. When the kingdom of Israel split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, Baal worship became more widespread in Israel under King Ahab and his wife Jezebel. Jezebel, a Phoenician princess, aggressively promoted Baal worship, leading to the establishment of Baal altars and temples in Israel, a move that incited opposition from the prophets. 10. Baal's decline and rejection. Over time, Baal's worship began to lose influence as Israel embraced the reforms of the prophets and the centralization of Yahweh worship. The reforms of King Josiah. One of the most significant events in the decline of Baal worship was the religious reform under King Josiah of Judah, 7th century BC. Josiah's reform involved the destruction of pagan idols, including those of Baal, and the centralization of worship in the Temple of Jerusalem. This reform was seen as an attempt to return to the pure worship of Yahweh and eliminate the influence of foreign gods. The fall of Carthage and the end of Baal worship. Despite the efforts to purge Israel of Baal worship, the Phoenician colonies like Carthage continued to venerate Baal for centuries. The final decline of Baal worship came after the fall of Carthage in 146 BCE. With the destruction of Carthage at the hands of the Ottomans, Baal's worship was largely wiped out from the Mediterranean world, and his cult was no longer a significant force in the region. 11. Baal and later religious thought. As Baal's influence waned in the ancient world, his role as a symbol of apostasy and idolatry continued to resonate in later religious traditions. Baal and Christian theology. In Christian theology, Baal continued to be seen as the embodiment of false worship and the temptation to stray from the true God. The Bible frequently uses Baal as a representation of everything that stands in opposition to the worship of Yahweh. In the New Testament, the worship of Baal is cited as an example of idolatry and moral corruption. Baal in modern interpretation. Today, Baal is often viewed as a symbol of the struggle between monotheism and polytheism, between the ethical demands of Yahweh and the materialistic temptations represented by false gods. His legacy lives on in the continued emphasis on the dangers of idolatry and the importance of exclusive devotion to the one true God. In the modern context, Baal is viewed primarily as a symbol of ancient idolatry, apostasy, and false worship. The ancient worship of Baal and his associated practices have long been rejected in mainstream religious thought, especially within Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which all share a strong monotheistic foundation. However, the legacy of Baal continues to resonate in various ways in modern discussions, especially in terms of cultural and theological significance. 1. Baal as a symbol of idolatry. Baal remains a prominent figure in theological discussions about idolatry and false worship. In contemporary religious contexts, particularly in Christianity and Judaism, Baal is often used as a symbol of turning away from the true worship of God in favor of materialism, power, or the pursuit of unholy or unethical desires. This perspective views Baal as a representation of human tendency to worship things that distract from spiritual truth, such as wealth, fame, or worldly success. Modern interpretations of idolatry. Baal's worship in ancient times, with its focus on fertility and the material aspects of life, is often compared to modern-day materialism and consumerism. In some Christian sermons and teachings, Baal is used as a metaphor for the temptation of false idols in the modern world, encouraging people to focus on spiritual fulfillment rather than the pursuit of material wealth or shallow pleasures. 2. Baal in pop culture and media. In modern popular culture, Baal has made appearances in various forms of media, often as a character or force representing evil, chaos, or corruption. His ancient association with fertility, storms, and warfare gives him a versatile role in storytelling, especially in works dealing with ancient gods, mythology, or occult themes. In literature and movies, Baal is sometimes used as a name for antagonistic characters or forces, drawing from his ancient reputation as a powerful and rebellious deity. For example, Baal has appeared in fantasy novels, video games, and even TV series as a god of destruction or a representation of a corrupt force that must be defeated. In many such cases, Baal embodies the temptation to succumb to power, destruction, or control, much like he did in ancient religious practices. In occult practices, some modern occult traditions have incorporated Baal or similar ancient deities into their rituals and beliefs. These practices often seek to revive or draw power from ancient pagan gods, using Baal as a symbol of rebellious strength or control over nature. 3. Baal in political and cultural symbolism. In the modern political and cultural landscape, Baal sometimes emerges as a symbol for rebellion, power, or defiance against traditional or established authority. This usage often reflects the idea that Baal represented the challenge to monotheistic religions in the ancient world, particularly against Yahweh worship in Israel. In certain fringe or alternative groups, Baal may be invoked as a figure representing the rejection of religious or cultural conformity. Baal's temples and monuments. One of the most controversial modern uses of Baal's legacy comes from the 2016 reconstruction of an ancient Baal temple arch in London and New York City, which sparked debates over the preservation and display of historical religious symbols. These reconstructions were meant to highlight the destruction of ancient cultural heritage by groups such as ISIS, which destroyed the original temple in Palmyra, Syria. The symbolic use of Baal's arch in this context was intended to represent the resilience of cultural heritage, though some critics argued that it inadvertently glorified or romanticized the worship of a deity that was historically viewed as a symbol of false gods and apostasy. 4. Psychological and philosophical implications. In psychological terms, Baal can be seen as an archetype that represents the human struggle with temptation, desires for power, and the conflict between material and spiritual needs. He symbolizes the pursuit of worldly rewards and the temptation to abandon higher moral and ethical principles for self-serving desires. Philosophers and theologians might use Baal as an allegory for the dangers of compromising one's integrity or values in pursuit of fleeting pleasures or power. The temptation of power. Baal's role as a warrior god, often depicted as fighting chaos or rival gods, can also symbolize the internal struggle many individuals face when seeking power, control, or dominance in the modern world. In this way, Baal might represent the desire to impose one's will upon others, the pursuit of dominance, or the willingness to sacrifice ethical values for success. 5. Baal in the context of environmentalism. Given Baal's ancient association with storms, fertility, and agriculture, there have been modern environmental interpretations of his character. In some environmental movements, Baal is seen as a symbol of the forces of nature that need to be respected and preserved. This interpretation aligns Baal with the natural world, particularly in areas related to agricultural practices, the balance of nature, and the cycles of life and death. Environmental metaphor. As a god associated with storms and weather, Baal can also be seen as representing the uncontrollable and often destructive forces of nature, which modern society must learn to respect and mitigate. His mythological battles with chaotic forces like the sea god Yem could symbolize the modern struggle against climate change and environmental degradation, where humanity must confront the power of nature to ensure survival. 6. Baal in religious dialogue. While Baal worship is not practiced today by major religions, the figure of Baal remains a significant part of interfaith dialogue, especially in terms of understanding the development of monotheism. For scholars of religion, Baal represents an important chapter in the history of religious thought, offering insight into the tensions between polytheism and the rise of monotheistic religions. The role of Baal in theological debates. In theological discussions about the nature of God and idolatry, Baal continues to serve as a historical example of what happens when people turn away from exclusive worship of God in favor of multiple deities or material pursuits. The struggle between Baal and Yahweh in ancient Israel's religious history serves as a foundation for discussions on the dangers of straying from a monotheistic faith. Conclusion. Baal's story is a multifaceted tale of cultural influence, religious conflict, and the temptation to worship false gods. From his prominent position as a fertility and weather god in the ancient Near East to his eventual rejection by the Israelites and decline in the Mediterranean world, Baal's worship symbolized the challenge that polytheism posed to the emerging monotheistic faith of Israel. His rejection in favor of Yahweh remains one of the most profound theological themes in the Hebrew Bible, representing the call for purity of worship and the dangers of syncretism. In the modern world, Baal continues to serve as a powerful symbol, representing not only the dangers of idolatry and materialism, but also the forces of rebellion and destruction. While his worship is no longer practiced in any significant way, his legacy persists through cultural, religious, and philosophical discussions. Baal remains a reminder of the ethical, spiritual, and psychological challenges humanity faces in the pursuit of power, prosperity, and spiritual truth. Whether invoked in popular culture, politics, or theological debate, Baal's enduring influence stands as a reminder of the age-old struggle between false worship and true devotion. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za and support this meaningful dyslexic initiative. Thank you for watching.